Replacements by Lisa Tuttle. Walking through grey North London to the tube station, feeling guilty that he hadn't let Jenny drive him to work, and yet relieved to have escaped another pointless argument, Stuart Holder glanced down at a pavement covered in a leaf fall of fast food cartons and white paper bags, and saw amidst the dog turds, beer cans, and dead cigarettes something horrible. It was about the size of a cat, naked looking, with leathery, hairless skin and thin, spiky limbs that seemed too frail to support the bulbous, ill-proportioned body. The face, with tiny bright eyes and a wet slit of a mouth, was like an evil monkey's. It saw him and moved in a crippled, spasmodic way. Reaching up, it made a clotted, strangled noise. The sound touched a nerve, like metal between the teeth, and the sight of it, mooling and choking and scrabbing, scaly claws flexing and wiggling, made him feel sick and terrified. He had no phobias. He found insects fascinating, not frightening, and regularly removed unharmed the spiders, wasps, and mayflies, which made Jenny squeal or shudder helplessly. But this was different. This wasn't some rare species of wingless bat escaped from a zoo. It wasn't something he would find pictured in any reference book. It was something that should not exist, a mistake, something alien. It did not belong in his world. A little snarl escaped him, and he took a step toward and brought his foot down hard. The small, shrill scream lanced through him as he crushed it beneath the shoe and ground it into the road. Afterwards, as he scraped the sole of his shoe against the curb to clean it, nausea overwhelmed him. He leaned over and vomited helplessly into a red and white striped box of chicken bones and crumpled paper. He straightened up, shaking, and wiped his mouth again and again with his pocket handkerchief. He wondered if anyone had seen, and had a furtive look around. Cars passed in a steady crawl. Across the road, a cluster of schoolgirls dawdled near a man smoking in front of Newsigans. But on this side of the road, the fried chicken franchise and bathroom suppliers had yet to open for the day, and the nearest pedestrians were more than 100 yards away. Until that moment, Stuart had never killed anything in his life. Mosquitoes and flies, of course. Other insects, probably. A nest of hornets once, that was all. He had never liked the idea of hunting. He never lived in the country. He remembered his father putting out poison bait for rats, and remembered shining bricks at those same vermin on a bit of waste ground where he had played as a boy. But rats weren't like other animals. They elicited no sympathy. Some things had to be killed if they would not be driven away. He made himself look to make sure the thing was not still alive. Nothing should be left to suffer, but his heel had crushed the thing's face out of recognition, and it was unmistakably dead. He felt a cool tide of relief and satisfaction, followed at once as he walked away by a nagging uncertainty, the imminence of guilt. Was he right to have killed it? To have acted on violent, irrational impulse? He didn't even know what it was. It might have been somebody's pet. He went hot and cold with shame and self-disgust. At the corner, he stopped with 5 or 6 others waiting to cross the road because he didn't want to look at them. He looked down, and there it was, alive again. He stifled a scream. No, of course it was not the same, but another. His leg twitched. He felt frantic with the desire to kill it. In the terror of his desire, the thin, wet mouth was moving as if it wanted to speak. At the crossing signal began its nagging blare. He tore his eyes away from the creature squirming at his feet. Everyone else had started to cross the street, their eyes, like their thoughts, directed ahead. All except one. A woman in a smart business suit was standing still on the pavement, looking down, a sick fascination on her face. As he looked at her, looking at it, the idea crossed his mind that he should kill it for her, as a chivalric protective act, but she wouldn't see it that way. She would be repulsed by his violence. He didn't want her to think he was a monster. He didn't want to be the monster who had exulted in the crunch of fragile bones, the flesh and viscera merging pulpily beneath the shoe. He forced himself to look away, to cross the road, to spare the alien life, but he wondered, as he did so, if he had been right to spare it. Stuart Holder worked as an editor for a publishing company with offices an easy walk from St. Paul's. Jeannie had worked there too as a secretary when they first met 5 years ago. Now, though, she had quite a senior position with another publishing house south of the river, and recently they had given her a car. He had been supportive of her ambition, supportive of her learning to drive, and yet proud of her on all fronts when she succeeded. Yet he was aware, although he never spoke of it, that something about her success made him uneasy. One small, niggling, insecure part of him was afraid that one day she would realize she didn't need him anymore. That was why he picked at her and second-guessed her decisions when she was behind the wheel and he was in the passenger seat. He recognized this as he walked briskly through more crowded streets toward his office, and he told himself he would do better. He would have to. If anything drove him apart, it was more likely to be his behavior than her career. He wished he had accepted her offer of a ride that day. Better any amount of petty irritation between husband and wife than to be haunted by the memory of that tiny face distorted in the death he had inflicted. Entering the building, he surreptitiously scraped the sole of his shoe against the carpet. Upstairs, 2 editors and one of the publicity girls were in a huddle around his secretary's desk. They turned on him in the guilty, defensive faces women who have been discussing secrets men aren't supposed to know. He felt his own defensiveness rising to meet theirs as he smiled. "Can I get any of you chaps a cup of coffee?" "I'm sorry, Stuart. Did you want..." As the others faded away, his secretary removed a stiff white paper bag with the Next logo printed on it from her desktop. "Joke, Frankie, joke. He always got his own coffee because he liked this excuse to wander. And he was always having to reassure her that she was not failing in her secretarial duties." He wondered if Next sold sexy underwear, decided it would be unkind to tease her further. He felt a strong urge to call Jenny and tell her what had happened, although he knew he wouldn't be able to explain, especially not over the phone. Just hearing her voice, the sound of sanity, would be a comfort, but he restrained himself just until afternoon, when he made the call he made every day. Her secretary told him she was in a meeting. "Tell her Stuart rang," he said, knowing she would call him back as always. But that day she didn't. Finally, at 5 minutes to 5, Stuart rang his wife's office and she was told she had left for the day. It was unthinkable for Jenny to leave work early, as unthinkable as for her to not return his call. He wondered if she was ill, although he usually stayed in the office until well after 6. Now he shoved a manuscript in his briefcase and went out to brave the rush hour. He wondered if she was mad at him, but Jenny didn't sulk. If she was angry, she said so. They didn't lie or play those sort of games with each other, pretending not to be in, forgetting to return calls. As he emerged from his local underground station, Stuart felt apprehensive. His eyes scanned the pavement and the gutters, and once or twice the flutter of paper made him jump. But the creatures he had seen that morning, there were no signs. The body of the one he had killed was gone, perhaps eaten by a passing dog, perhaps returned to whatever strange dimension had spawned it. He noticed, before he turned off the high street, that other pedestrians were also taking a keener than usual interest in the pavement and the edge of the road, and that made him feel vindicated somehow. London traffic being what it was, he was home before Jenny. While he waited for the sound of her key in the lock, he made himself a cup of tea, cursed, poured it down the sink, and had a stiff whiskey instead. He had just finished and was feeling much better when he heard the street door open. Oh, the look of her face reminded him unpleasantly of those women in the office this morning, making him feel like an intruder in his own place. Now Jenny smiled, but it was too late. "I didn't expect you to be here so early." "Nor me. I tried to call you, but they said you'd left already. I wondered if you were feeling all right." "I'm fine." "You look fine." The similar side of her melted away his irritation. He loved the way she looked. Her slender, boyish figure, her close-cropped, curly hair, her pale complexion and bright blue eyes. Her cheeks now had a slight, hectic flush. She caught her bottom lip between her teeth and gave him an assessing look before coming straight out with it. "How would you feel about keeping a pet?" Stuart felt a little conviction that she was not talking about a cat or a dog. He wondered if it was the whiskey or on an empty stomach, which made him feel dizzy. "It was under my car. If I hadn't happened to notice something moving down there, I would have run over it." She lifted her shoulders in a delicate shudder. "Oh God, Jenny, you wouldn't have brought it home." She looked indignant. "Well, of course I did. I couldn't just leave it in the street. Somebody else might have run over it." Or stepped on it, he thought, realizing now that he could never tell Jenny what he had done. That made him feel even worse, but maybe he was wrong. Maybe it was just a cat she'd rescued. What is it? She gave a strange, excited laugh. I don't know. Something rare, I think. Here, look. She slipped a large woven bag off her shoulder, opening it, holding it out to him. Look, isn't it the sweetest thing? How could two people who were so close, so alike in so many ways, see something so differently? He only wanted to kill it. Even now, while she had obviously fallen in love. He kept his face carefully neutral, although she couldn't help flinching from her description. Sweet? It gave him a pain to see how she pulled back, holding the bag protectively close as she said, well, I know it's not pretty, but so what? I thought it was horrible too at first sight. Her face clouded, as if she found her first impersonation difficult to remember or to credit, and her voice faltered a little. But then I realized how helpless it was. It needed me. It can't help it how it looks. Anyway, doesn't it remind you of the summit? What? Summit, 5 children in it, and it? He recognized the title, but her passion for old-fashioned children's books was something he didn't share. He shook his head impatiently. That thing didn't come out of a book, Jen. You found it in the street, and you don't know what it is or where it came from. It could be dangerous. It could be diseased. Dangerous? She said in a withering tone. You don't know. I've been with him all day, and he hasn't hurt me or anybody else at the office. He's perfectly happy being held, and he likes being scratched behind the ears. He did not miss the pronoun ship. It might have rabies. Don't be silly. Don't you be silly. It's not exactly native, is it? It might be carrying all sorts of foul parasites from South America or Africa or wherever. Now you're being racist. I'm not going to listen to you. And you've been drinking? She flounced out of the room. If he'd been holding his glass still, he might have thrown it. He closed his eyes and concentrated on breathing in and out slowly. This was worse than any argument they'd ever had. The only crucial disagreement of their marriage. Jenny had stronger views about many things than he did, so her wishes usually prevailed. He didn't mind that, but this was different. He wasn't having that creature in his home. He had to make her agree. Necessity cooled his blood. He had his temper under control when his wife learned. I'm sorry, he said, although she was one who should have apologized. Still looking prickly, she shrugged and would not meet his eyes. Want to go out to dinner tonight? She shook her head. I'd rather not. I've got some work to do. Can I get you something to drink? I'm only one whiskey ahead of you, honest. Her shoulders relaxed. I'm sorry. Low blow. Yeah, pour me one. And one for yourself. She sat down on the couch, her bag by her feet. Leaning over, reaching inside, she cooed, Who's my little sweetheart then? Normally, he would have taken a seat behind her. Now, though, he eyed the pale, misshapen bundle on her lap, and, after handing her a glass, retreated across the room. Don't get mad, but isn't having a pet one of those things we discussed and agreed on beforehand? He saw the tension come back into her shoulders, but she went on stroking the thing, keeping herself calm. Normally, yes, but this is special. I didn't plan it. It happened. And now I've got a responsibility to him, or her, she giggled. We don't even know what sex you are, do we, my precious? He said carefully, I can see you had to do something when you found it, but keeping it might not be the best thing. I'm not going to put it out on the street. No, but don't you think it would make sense to let a professional have a look at it? Take it to a vet, get it checked out, maybe it needs shots or something. She gave him a withering look, and for a moment he faltered. But then he rallied, Come on, Jenny, be reasonable. You can't just drag some strange animal off the street and keep it just like that. You don't even know what it eats. I gave it some fruit at lunch. It ate that. Well, it sucked out the juice. I don't think it can chew. But you don't know, do you? Maybe the fruit juice was just an aperitif. Maybe it needs half its weight in live insects every day, or a couple of small live animals. Do you really think you could cope with feeding it mice or rabbits fresh from the pet shop every week? Oh, Stuart. Well, will you just take it to a vet and make sure it's healthy? Will you do that much? And then I can keep it? If the vet says there's nothing wrong with it and it doesn't need to eat anything too impossible, then we can talk about it. Hey, don't pout at me. I'm not your father. I'm not telling you what to do. We're partners, and partners don't make unilateral decisions about things that affect them both. Partners discuss things and reach compromises. And there can't be any compromise about this. He felt as if she'd doused him with ice water. What? Either I win and I keep him, or you win and I give him up. Where's the compromise? This was why wars were fought, thought Stewart, but he didn't say it. He was the picture of sweet reason, explaining as if he meant it. The compromise is that we each try to see the other person's point. You get the animal checked out, make sure it's healthy, and I'll keep an open mind about having a pet and see if it might start liking him. Does he have a name yet? Her eyes flickered. No. We can choose that later together if we keep him. He still felt cold, and although he could think of no reason for it, he was certain she was lying to him. In bed that night, as he groped for sleep, Stewart kept seeing the tiny, hideous face of the thing screaming as his foot came down on it. That moment of blind, killing rage was not like him. He couldn't deny he had done it, or how it had felt. But now, as Jenny slept innocently beside him, as the creature she had rescued, a twin to his victim, crouched alive in the bathroom, he tried to remember it differently. In fantasy, he stopped his foot, he controlled his rage, and staring at the memory of the alien animal, he shrugged to see past his anger and his fear, to see through those fiercer masculine emotions, and find his way to Jenny's feminine pity. Maybe his intuition had been wrong and hers was right. Maybe if he had waited a little longer, instead of lashing out, he would have seen how unnecessary his fear was. Poor little thing, it's helpless, it needs me, it's harmless, so I won't harm it. Slowly, in imagination, he worked toward that feeling, her feeling, and then, suddenly, he was there, through the anger, through the fear, through the hate, to, not love, he couldn't say that, but compassion. Glowing and warm, compassion filled his heart and flooded his veins, melting the ice and washing him out to sea, into the sea of sleep and dreams where Jenny smiled and loved him, and there was no space between them for misunderstanding. He woke in the middle of the night with a desperate urge to pee. He was out of the bed in the dark hallway when he remembered what was waiting in the bathroom. He couldn't go back to bed with the need unsatisfied, but he stood outside the bathroom door, hand hovering over the light switch on this side, afraid to turn it on. Open the door, go in. It wasn't, he realized, that he was afraid of a creature no bigger than a football and less likely to hurt him. Rather, he was afraid that he might hurt it. It was a stronger variant of that reckless vertigo he had felt sometimes in high places, the fear not of falling, but of throwing oneself off, of losing control and giving in to self-destructive urges. He didn't want to kill the thing. Had his own feelings not undergone a sea change, Jenny's love for it would have been enough to stop him. But some dark urge stronger than himself might make him. Finally, he went down to the end of the hall and outside to the weedly, muddy little area which passed for the communal front garden, and in the rubish bins of necessity were kept, and shivering in his thin cotton pajamas in the damp, chilly air, he watered the sickly forsythia, or whatever it was, that Jenny had planted so optimistically last winter. When he went back inside, more uncomfortable than when he had gone out, he saw the light was on in the bathroom, and as he approached the half-open door, he heard Jenny's voice, low and soothing. There, nobody's gonna hurt you, I promise. You're safe here. Go to sleep now. Go to sleep. He went past without pausing, knowing he would be viewed as an intruder, and got back into bed. He fell asleep, lulled by the meaningless murmur of her voice, still waiting for her to join him. Stewart was not used to doubting Jenny, but when she told him she had visited a veterinarian who had given her new pet a clean bill of health, he did not believe her. In a neutral tone he asked, did he say what kind of animal it was? He didn't know. He didn't know what it was, but he was sure it was perfectly healthy. God, Stewart, what do you want? It's obvious to everybody but you that my little friend is healthy and happy. What do you want, a birth certificate? He looked at her friend, held close against her side, looking squashed and miserable. What do you mean, everybody? She shrugged. Everybody at work. They're all jealous as anything. She planted the kiss on the thing's pointy head. And then she looked at him, and he realized that she had not kissed him as she usually did when he came in. She'd been clutching that thing the whole time. "I'm going to keep him," she said quietly. "If you don't like it, then..." Her paws seemed to pile up in solid, transparent blocks between them. "Then, I'm sorry, but that's how it is." So much for an equal relationship, he thought. So much for sharing. Mortally wounded, he decided to pretend it hadn't happened. "Want to go out for Indian tonight?" She shook her head, turning away. "I want to stay in. There's something on telly. You go on?" "You could bring me something back if you wouldn't mind. A Spanish bajie and a couple of naans would do me." "And what about something for your little friend?" She smiled a private smile. "He's all right. I've fed him already." Then she raised her eyes to his and acknowledged his effort. "Thanks." He went out and got takeaway for them both, and stopped at the off-license for the Mexican beer Jenny favored. A radio in the off-license was playing a sentimental song about love that Stewart remembered from his earliest childhood. His mother used to sing it. He was shocked to realize he had tears in his eyes. That night, Jenny made up the sofa bed in the spare room, explaining, "He can't stay in the bathroom. It's just not satisfactory. You know it's not." "He needs the bed?" "I do." He's confused. Everything is new and different. I'm the only thing he can count on. I have to stay with him. He needs me." "He needs you? What about me?" "Oh, Stuart," she said impatiently. "You're a grown man. You can sleep by yourself for a night or two." "And that thing can't?" "Don't call him a thing. What am I supposed to call him?"
In here.
When the creature sated fell off, she kept it cradled on her lap and reached with her other hand for the surgical spirit and cotton wool on the table, moistened a piece of cotton wool and tamped it to the tiny wound. Then, finally, she met her husband's eyes. "He has to eat," she said reasonably. "He can't chew. He needs blood. Not very much, but... And he needs it from you? You can't... I can't hold down some poor scared rabbit or dog for him, no." She made a shuddering face. "Well, really, think about it. You know how squeamish I am. This is so much easier. It doesn't hurt." "It hurts me," he thought, but couldn't say it. "Jenny..." "Oh, don't start," she said crossly. "I'm not going to get any disease from it, and he doesn't take enough to make any difference. Actually, I like it. We both do. Jenny, please don't. Please, for me, give it up." "No." She held the scraggy, ugly thing close and gazed at Stewart like a dispassionate executioner. "I'm sorry, Stewart, I really am, but this is non-negotiable. If you can't accept that, you'd better leave." This was the showdown he had been avoiding. The end of it all. He tried to rally his arguments and then realized he had none. She had said it. She had made her choice, and it was non-negotiable. And he realized, looking at her now, that although she reminded him of the woman he loved, he didn't want to live with what she had become. He could have refused to leave. After all, he had done nothing wrong. Why should he give up his home, this flat which was half his? But he could not force Jenny out onto the streets with nowhere to go. He still felt responsible for her. "I'll pack a bag and make a few phone calls," he said quietly. He knew someone from work was looking for a lodger, and if all else failed, his brother had a spare room. Already in his thoughts, he had left. He ended up, once they'd sorted out their finances and formally separated, in a flat just off the Holloway Road near Archway. It was not too far a walk if Jenny cared to visit, which she never did. Sometimes he called on her, but it was painful to feel himself an unwelcome visitor in the home they once shared. He never had to fire Frankie. She handed in her notice a week later, telling him she'd been offered an editorial job at the Women's Press. He wanted his pets in the office were part of the contract over there. He never learned if its creatures had names. He never knew where they had come from or how many there were. Had they fallen only in Islington, Frankie had a flat somewhere off Upper Street. He never saw anything on the news about them or read any official confirmation of their existence. But he was aware of occasional oblique references to them in other contexts, occasional glimpses. One evening, coming home on the tube, he found himself looking at the woman sitting opposite. She was about his own age, probably in her early 30s, with strawberry blonde hair, greenish eyes, and an almost translucent complexion. She was strikingly dressed in high, soft leather boots, a long black woolen skirt, and an enveloping cashmere cloak of cranberry red. High on the cloak, below and to the right of the fastening at the neck, was a simple gold circle brooch. Attached to it, he noticed a very fine golden chain which vanished inside the cloak, like the end of a watch fob. He looked at it idly, certain he had seen something like it before, on another woman, knowing it reminded him of something. The train arrived at Archway, and as he rose to leave the train, so did the attractive woman. Her stride matched his. They might as well leave the station together. He tried to think of something to say to her, something pretext for striking up a conversation. He was, after all, a single man now, and she might be a single woman. He had forgotten how single people in London contrived to meet. He looked at her again, sidelong, hoping she would turn her head and look at him. With one slender hand she toyed with her golden chain. Her cloak fell open slightly as she walked, and he caught a glimpse of the creature she carried. Beneath it, close to her body, attached by a slender golden chain, he stopped walking and let her get away from him. He had to rest for a little while before he felt able to climb the stairs to the street. By then, he was wondering if he had really seen what he thought he'd seen. The glimpse had been so brief, but he had been deeply shaken by what he saw or imagined, and he turned the wrong way outside the station. When he finally realized he was at the corner of Jenny's Road, which had once also been his, rather than retrace his steps, he decided to take the turning and walk past her house. Lights were on in the front room, the curtains drawn against the early winter dark. His footsteps slowed as he drew nearer. He felt such a longing to be inside, back home, belonging. He wondered if she would be pleased at all to see him. He wondered if she ever felt lonely as he did. Then he saw the tiny, dark figure between the curtains in the window. It was spread-eagled against the glass, grappling uselessly inside, longing to be out. As he stared, feeling its pain as his own, the curtains swayed and opened slightly as a human figure moved between them. He saw the woman reach out and pull the creature away from the glass, back into the warm, lighted room with her, and the curtains fell again, shutting him out. Replacements by Lisa Tuttle. Walking through grey North London to the tube station, feeling guilty that he hadn't let Jenny drive him to work, and yet relieved to have escaped another pointless argument, Stuart Holder glanced down at a pavement covered in a leaf fall of fast cartons and white paper bags, and saw, amid the dog turds, beer cans, and dead cigarettes, something horrible. It was about the size of a cat, naked looking, with leathery, hairless skin,